Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating shift happening right now in the world of artificial intelligence at work. We are going to examine exactly why feeding your enterprise AI more and more documents is absolutely not stopping it from completely breaking your live systems. Let's kick things off with a hard truth. Every team is limited by how quickly it can understand its own system. Right now, we're feeding the AI monster basically everything we can get our hands on, right? FAQs, wikis, standard operating procedures, customer docs, you name it. But despite feeding it all that data, the monster is still totally failing when it comes to safe execution. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the enterprise AI trap, knowledge versus structural context, the danger of action, the velocity tax, why complexity is a record, and finally, the faithfully read org. All right, section 1, the enterprise AI trap. Up until yesterday, we were judging AI mostly on its ability to just summarize information and retrieve answers, but that is changing incredibly fast. The problem is, our ambition for AI is moving way faster than our foundation. In fact, Gartner actually warns that 40% of enterprises are going to bench their autonomous AI agents by 2027. Why? Well, because governance gaps and system failures usually only become visible after you have a production incident. We're asking AI to take action inside our systems, but it's tripping over wires it literally cannot see. Moving on to section 2. This is the core divide, knowledge versus structural context. So what kind of context are we actually giving these systems when we ask them to do work for us? There's a major divide here. First, you have knowledge context. This helps agents answer questions. It's the whole world of RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. It's your records, tickets, documents. You ask an agent for your refund policy, and knowledge context points it to the right PDF. But then we have structural context. This is what helps agents actually act. Structural context is live system awareness. We're talking flows, permissions, dependencies, business logic. It's not just what your organization knows. It is how your organization actually works. Now, you might be thinking, can't we just use our existing documentation for that? Well, no. If you rely on static documentation for structural awareness, you run straight into what researchers call context rot. This is when the persistent context for your AI becomes stale because the underlying software changed. To put a number on it, a recent study showed that 23% of repositories actually have stale code element references. So relying on static docs means your company wiki is telling the AI one thing, but the live, breathing organization is doing something completely different. Your AI is confidently acting on ghost data. Which brings us to section 3, the danger of action. So what actually happens when an agent stops just summarizing meetings and starts taking action without this live structural understanding? It really all boils down to one fundamental question. What breaks if I change this field? In complex enterprise systems like Salesforce or ServiceNow, a field is almost never just a field. An agent that only has knowledge context can tell you what the field means, but an agent with structural context understands what changing that field might actually break. Changing literally one element can set off a total domino effect of hidden dependencies. A simple status change could accidentally trigger revenue recognition. A validation role might suddenly block a specific user profile from doing their job. Or maybe managed packages rely on the exact field an AI agent just decided to delete to clean things up. The agent had all the knowledge context in the world, but it lacked the structural context screaming, hey, do not touch this until you understand what depends on it. Section 4, the velocity tax. Now, if AI struggles with this stuff, how are human operators doing? Spoiler alert, they're struggling immensely. It creates what we call the velocity tax. An analysis of over 12,000 real interactions by systems operators reveals a pretty staggering reality. 80.4% of their time is spent just doing discovery. It's basically corporate archaeology, just digging through layers of past decisions to figure out what's connected to what. Design takes up about 18.4%, and actual execution, the build phase, a tiny 1.2%. The real constraint on moving fast isn't building, it is understanding the system safely. This discovery burden is so incredibly heavy, and honestly so interrupt-driven during the day that the data shows something kind of crazy about human behavior. Design and documentation work actually doubles after 9 p.m. Between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m., when the company's Slack finally goes quiet, systems administrators are awake, fueled by way too much coffee, desperately trying to map out dependencies before all that institutional knowledge just evaporates. And all of this lost context? It is a massive financial drain. It costs an estimated $70,000 annually per single admin just to reconstruct what the last admin built. That's $70K burned just on tangling history before a single productive change is made. Before a human, or an AI for that matter, can safely execute a change, they are spending hours, days, or even weeks of paid time just trying to figure out the historical plumbing. Okay, Section 5, complexity is a record. The gut reaction here, especially from leadership, is usually to blame the system, to say we need to simplify and standardize everything before AI can be trusted. But we really need to rethink that. Your org's complexity is a record of how the business actually runs. We have to attack the cliché that complexity is inherently bad. Every custom object, every validation rule, every convoluted workflow, it was all built because at some point your business operations demanded it. It's literally a record of your company's evolution. So, here is the absolute crucial takeaway. Unread complexity is the real threat here, not the complexity itself. The problem isn't that your enterprise system is highly customized or messy. The problem is that it's entirely illegible to the agents, whether human or AI, trying to operate inside it. If the complexity is readable, well, then it's just information. And finally, Section 6, the faithfully read org. Look, the solution is not to just pause all your AI initiatives while a team of consultants spends 2 years manually documenting everything in your organization. The solution is to make the organization faithfully readable in real time. How do we do that? With a unified metadata graph. Think of this like a live, self-updating GPS for your system structure. It automatically maps out all the fields, flows, permissions, and logic, turning those invisible dependencies into shared, machine-readable context. It basically bridges the gap between how your systems are supposed to work on paper and how they actually behave in reality. And doing this unlocks a totally new way of working. It's often called an agentic layer workflow. Tools like Sweep are actually pioneering this by providing structural context as a foundational layer. It replaces that 80% manual archaeology chunk with a continuous, smooth flow. You discover instantly using the live map, you design with full context so you know exactly what will break, and you build safely without having to restart your entire investigation every single time the system changes. Providing this structural context is quite literally the only way to move fast and stay safe. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today as we rapidly move from AI that just answers questions to AI that takes real, meaningful actions in your business. I'm going to leave you with this one thought. Are your agents just reading the history books, or do they actually have a map of the plumbing?